Let me just go ahead and welcome everyone to Network Nova's Live Armchair Pundits. But tonight is just pundit because Katherine is not with us tonight. I will be doing this on my own. So it'll be interesting to see if I can talk for an entire 30 minutes all by my lonesome. So interestingly enough, as we get started, I was watching a TV show today and it was perfect. The timing could not have been better. It was Leah Breathwaite, and what she said was she's doing a new play, and the play is called Trinity. And they asked her if they asked her to do this at the Kennedy Center, would she do it? And she said, "Well, they're not going to ask me to do it at the Kennedy Center, but I don't think that really matters." She said, "I don't really have to have a big audience. I could invite my friends and family, and that would be just fine because it would get the message across." And what she said was, "It doesn't matter how big your audience is or isn't. Every voice matters." And I thought that that was just perfect for tonight. That doesn't matter how big your audience is, doesn't matter how big your voice is, but every voice is important. And so that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to talk about my voice and the things that I want to talk about tonight, the things that I think are important. And I thought that as we think about the discussion that happened this week with President Obama, I was remembering when I was in third grade, a little girl turned around to me and she said, "You come from monkeys." And I was telling my sister that story today, and she said, "That was so long ago, and you still remember that?" And I said, "Yes, I absolutely remember that." And what I don't remember is what my response to her was. I don't remember my response. I was in third grade, but that is what she said to me. She said, "You come from monkeys." And so, what that says is, and what I want us here to know is how old that trope is, how old the notion that Black people come from monkeys. I mean, it's not true, but what it is a way to dehumanize people. It's been so interesting to see the response from everyone. There are social media posting these beautiful pictures of the Obamas as a family. And that is an effort to humanize them, to say that even though they are saying these horrible things about these people, this is who we believe they are. But when I first saw that, and as long as Trump has been saying that, I always knew that it was a signal. It was a signal when he said that Mexican people were taking away our jobs, taking away Black jobs. And everybody immediately jumped on the whole thing about, well, my job is an accountant and I'm a president and I'm a this. But that wasn't the message in my mind that Trump was trying to get across. What he was trying to say is that your job is a job doing something, labor, whatever we think menial labor might be. That was the whole notion. So that was another signal. But the signal this week was even bigger. And even though they pulled it back, they put it back, they pulled it back, they put it back, the damage was already done. Because what it was trying to do is signal to his people that this is what this is all about. It really is about race. It really is about people who are brown and Black and people who agree with them, that we are going to dehumanize. So think about it this way. If you're going to take the most popular couple in the country, the man who has achieved the highest office in this country, his wife, who is as successful in her own right, and say that these people are just, not human, they're subhuman, you have to ask yourself what it says about everybody else. So the signal is that no matter who you are, who you think you are, what kind of education you might have, where you grew up, none of that matters. Because at the end of the day, this is how we think of you. And I want my people to know that this is how they should think of you too. And what I think is also important in this message is that, you know, the signal is there. It's very, very clear. Now, some will say that this was an effort to pull away from the Epstein files. Everything is an effort to pull away from the Epstein files. but that doesn't mean that you don't take every opportunity to keep your people engaged. And so this was clearly a message to his people to say that this is the fight that they are in, and this is what we want you to stay with. The other thing that I think is really important about this message, when they talk about the Obamas in this way, that they are talking about all of us. Um, they're talking about me. They're talking about people who look like me. Um, it is to say to his people that we are unified against them, against the other. And I wanna be sure that people think about that in that way. And I also think that it is a moment to think about the Republican leaders or people who are staying silent. I think it's a moment to think about what they are saying, because in this moment, if they don't say anything, in my mind, that is agreement with what, this president has said. So, the other thing that I think is important about this moment is what's happening with our immigrants and immigration. They want you to know that, of course, based on the signals that are given, it doesn't matter whether you came in the country the right way. It doesn't matter whether you were born here. What they are clearly telling us is that if you are an immigrant and you have brown skin, you are not welcome here. And here's the reason that I know that, because if they were welcome here, they would be more forgiving and apologizing to American citizens that they have done these horrendous things to. But they have not. They've not said a word. Does it matter whether it's just because your paperwork is wrong? Does it matter whether or not it's because you're going to the courthouse to get your information and to get your immigration status secured? Doesn't matter. You're being picked up anyway. So I think that's important. Now, there's something else that I want to say that I think is important, is that in this time, it was the first time that Tim Scott actually spoke up. I think his words were something like, "This is the most racist thing I've ever seen come from this White House." And my response to that is, "Well, your eyes have been closed since 2016 because there's been a whole bunch of stuff that's come out of this White House." Um, but the point is that there are people like Tim Scott and others, who go along with this president, and they go along with this racism. They go along with this because they're sort of thinking like, well, it's not really me. I'm not like them. They don't mean me. They mean somebody else. And so you either go along or you just pretend that, the world is different and it's not including you in this whole thing. I think my sister mentioned Nicki Minaj today, who's running around with the president, and they said some of her supporters are saying, well, I'm going to vote Republican now. Well, this brings me to my best story. So this is my history, not my Heather Cox Richardson history, but the Finale Norton history. I use this all the time because I think it's really pertinent. I don't know how many of you know the story of Geronimo. So we've seen it as children, and we've seen Geronimo. He's the Indian who is really revered by his people, and we just can't catch him. The army is trying to catch him, and they just can't catch him. So they use these scouts to track Geronimo. So these scouts go around, and they, along with their families, they decide that they're going to track Geronimo and they're going to help capture him. And so it reminds me of those times in history when people have gone against history to go against their own people in ways that is demoralizing, that is wrong, just simply wrong, because it's not the right thing to do. And we see that in some of our voters who, no matter what this administration might say about Black people or brown people or Jewish people or our LGBTQ community, that some of them are right in the mix with it. And that's how it was with Geronimo. They were right in the mix. They were going to help capture Geronimo because they were not like that. Well, for those of you who might not know the story, they did end up capturing Geronimo. But those scouts who worked to capture Geronimo When they sent Geronimo away, they went right along with them. They were in the same carriage, the same jail that they put Geronimo in, they went to. And they actually ended up dying of starving and disease, the way that they treated all Indians during that time. Nothing favorable happened for them for betraying Geronimo and betraying something that was really important. And the point is that that happens throughout history. There are many examples in history where folks have turned against their communities, trying to be with the where they think the power is, and it has never ever turned out well. Just think about that for a minute. It's never turned out well. And so I think that that is a lesson for us today. I love this. People who go along often aren't betraying others first. They're being positioned to be betrayed last. And history is ruthless on this point and is consistent on this point. It does not change. So, why do I think that this is so important for us to talk about today? And I talked about, how it's happened throughout history. And I just want to share some of the examples that we can sort of look back to where this happened, not just with Geronimo, but other times. Um, we had the enslaved and free Black collaborators. I'm sure many of you saw Django Unchained. It's a movie. It was fun, but it was true. And what happened is the Black overseers and informants, they were elevated, but it was only temporary. As soon as the power shifted, as soon as people were scared, they were the very first ones discarded. And so white supremacy only tolerates collaboration until it's no longer useful. And we see that when we saw January 6th, we saw that there were men who were elevated at the top who were not white, but they're still fighting against and supporting this administration because they think that they are different, but they will be the first ones discarded. During the Reconstruction era, after the Civil War, they elevated a lot of Black Republicans. And what happened to them? They were targeted, they were lynched, they were driven out. And so loyalty did not save them. And it was the same thing with the sections in Nazi Germany, where some folks went along because they thought that they were granted some type of honorary status. But at the same time, as soon as it was no longer comfortable, they were discarded as well. It never, ever pays to do that. And people will know and they will see that history repeats itself in that instance. So why am I talking about this? Why am I spending time talking about this? Well, it's something that was really, I know Geronimo did. He captured his own kind, and they just, I love the story of Geronimo. I think that it's one. Wilhelmina, thank you for posting that. It is one that resonates with people. You can understand it. It's a story that makes sense to people. But why am I talking about this? I was really interested in how we got here and what turned the tide for Trump that we're having conversations about right now in terms of how the tide is changing. And so I did a little bit of research to understand where did this voter shift come from? What happened? If any of you have ever read Steve Phillips' Democracy in Color, one of the things that he says is one of the most accurate predictors of voting is race. And so that's why he always talks about building a multicultural coalition in order to win these elections. And that's where our fight is and where it begins. Now, 55% of white voters voted for Trump. So that leaves the rest of us. But what happened? Um, I think you guys will, some of you might know this, but this is really, I just wanted to get a little more defiant in terms of feeling confident about my answers here. But Pew Research said that Trump support among Hispanic voters rose to 48% in 2024. It was 36% before. It also showed that the voters who turned out, eligible Hispanic voters who voted in 2024, but not in 2020, backed Trump 60% to 37%. Wow. And so it's this thing about why why is this happening? Why are folks feeling like Trump is the person for them. Well, based on some research, it really wasn't immigration. It was about the economy, which is something else that sort of, um, I don't know, it just sort of worries me that in this instance where so much stuff is happening, that we're still focused on the economy. So why am I talking about that? Well, that brings me to my other point that I think is like important. Why is it that there are things that no matter where you are in the world, that we find them to be immoral and unethical? Doesn't matter where, you find them to be immoral. But then we don't do anything. When I say we're not talking about us, I'm talking about the voters that we're all trying to talk to, the friends and family members who are still supporting this regime. And I really have been just troubled thinking about that. So I think about, okay, this 30% who's still good with all the things that Trump is doing, but then we still have a population that's not saying anything about it. We've got this Republican House that majority of the time they go along with all of these things. And we have all these voters who either are disengaged and stay home. And why is that when we know that these things that are occurring, that we would find them morally offensive and dangerous and not fitting of not just this country, but anywhere in the world? So I've been thinking about why that is. And we've all been sort of talking about, why is it that um, that we're having this big conversation about pedophiles, and yet we can change that subject really quickly and go on. Or we're having a big conversation about children who are hungry, but we still find ways our people that we're trying to talk to are still justified it. They're still good with what Donald Trump is doing. Why is that? Well, I kept thinking, well, we keep talking about democracy. And I had written about this before that the word is just like, it just goes right by and people just keep right on going. Because I think, well, if we lose democracy, does any of these other things really matter? So what it really boils down to is that it doesn't feel real to people. It feels really abstract to people. It doesn't feel like it's something that could actually happen to them. And so when you think about it, for example, if I say, "Oh my goodness, children aren't getting their meals. We're stopping SNAP benefits." Well, for most people, it doesn't feel like children are dying. But if you say children are dying of hunger, and in the United States we have X number of children who die every single day because they didn't get any food, then that sort of changes the dynamic about how people think about it. We talk about this over and over and over again. Billionaires are paying less taxes than teachers, right? But when you say billionaires, taxpayers are footing the bill for billionaires, you are paying less than them, and they are living happy and big in their yachts while you are living where you are and paying taxes for them. Does that feel right? So it's really figuring out how we talk about democracy in ways that sort of connects the abstract to the real. So if you just say we're losing our democracy, people don't pay any attention to that. They don't think about it in any kind of way. They don't think about it being immoral. They don't think about it being bad. They just hear it and it doesn't really mean anything. And so that is where we are. And I just bring us to, for those of you who've ever listened to Lindley Thorne talk about the Storyteller Project and why it's so important, there are ways that we have to do that with Lindley and the project, but we also have to do it for ourselves with our friends and our family. And when we're knocking on doors or when we're trying to tell stories, is that we have to tell stories in a way that matters to people, in ways that they can take it from being abstract to figuring out how to make it real for themselves. And I'm not gonna say that it's easy, because I don't think it's easy. I think it's really hard, and I think that sometimes I want to scream and shout and just sort of, find ways to crush people, because I'm so angry and sometimes so hurt by the things that we see. But I think at the end of the day, we really have to think about, I gave you some statistics, but they won't really matter. So you gotta tell the story so that it feels real. Um, you have to really talk about what the harm is in ways that people understand it, which is, we always talk about the villain. I call them monsters. So we have to talk about the monsters in the ways that matter. And we just have to continue to do these things. I was listening to Paola Ramos on TV the other day, and I thought it was important because she was talking about Hispanic voters and who they are. She was talking about that they're not monolithic. Everybody always says that no one is a monolith, and they may not be, but we're going to have to build some kind of community if we're going to figure out how to win this thing. Thinking about that, when I think about those numbers that I gave you about the coalition that helped us lose this election, 55% white voters, we got that. But at the end of the day, it was this mixture of uninformed voters, Hispanic voters who were really going towards Donald Trump because of the economy, not really because of any other issues. We have to think about, even if it's not a monolith, there are still things that are just wrong, that are just morally wrong. And it doesn't take someone who is, um, extra intelligent or, holier than thou to see that some things just don't sit right with us. The values of them just don't sit right. And so I often ask myself, now that we are where we are, after people have been betrayed by this government, any of the voters who thought the economy was going to get better, they're betrayed. Anybody who was a Hispanic voter who voted for Donald Trump and the numbers that voted for him because they thought that they were not they were not them. They have come here the right way. They're not part of, the immigrants, the way that we talk about them. That's not them. I think that there's an opportunity for us to figure out how to tell this story. I I don't know um, how we get people to change their minds in meaningful ways. For example, um, I was listening to um, someone talk about, the different voters. And in this particular case, they were talking to voters who had voted for Trump in 2016 and found out that he did not do the things that he was supposed to do. In that same group, they were also talking to people who voted for a third party candidate. And they asked them if they had a chance to do it over again, would they vote differently? And I want you guys to tell me what you think they said. You just write in there if you think they said yes, they would do it different, or no, they would not do it different. I'm gonna wait for just a second. And explicit, if you're still here, you owe me a phone call or a text message or something. I know you are busy, but I need to hear from you. So I just always like to put him on the spot when he's here. Explicit. If you guys aren't reading him, he is pretty amazing. He is an amazing writer. I call him myself. This is my name for you, explicit, the Black Heather Cox Richardson, because everything he does is with facts and information, and he documents everything. The writing is serious, it's complex, it's complicated. I have to read it twice, but I'm way smarter when I finish. All right, so people said no, and you're absolutely right. They said that they would do the same thing over again, that they would do it again, and the reason that they would do that, yeah, only a small percentage. The reason that they do that is because they hate to be wrong, and so it protects their, um, it protects their ego because they don't have to admit that they're wrong, which is just sometimes humans, us, we make me crazy because we cannot admit being wrong. We cannot admit that we made a mistake, even if it means living in a country like we're living in right now. Which, by the way, I just want you to know that about 7 out of 10 people at the end of the day, as we talk about the price of groceries and food and all those things, that 7 out of 10 people are still not paying attention. They're still going along with their day to day, and they're not paying any attention to what's happening. So that just brings me to the amount of work that we all have to do. It's going to take a great amount of courage to talk to friends and family, um, to get them to recognize that this is the time for them to be involved. It's going to be the people that we know. there are gonna be people who we just can't get through to. They're that 30% group of MAGA that's nothing's gonna happen with them. But there is this group of people, whether they're Hispanic or Black or LGBT or older or younger, who have just not been engaged. That is our audience. We're going to have to shift from trying to persuade, staunch Republicans and MAGA people. It is a waste of our time. Our time is going to be better served talking to people who have been disengaged and have been tired and have been um, feeling like they've been left behind. That is our audience. Those are the people that we have to talk to. In your family, if there are Republicans in your family, um, you can talk to them too, because there are things that are happening. I mean, you know who your loved ones are, and you want to feel really good that they are not the people who we see supporting this administration, this regime. But some of us are going to probably be really, really disappointed about who some of the people we know are. I know I have been. I had a boss that I loved, gave me my first big job, and I saw him online, and he is a MAGA guy. That was really disappointing. But we're gonna find that. But we have to move past that and focus on the people that we know, we can move them to help us save this country. And I'm gonna figure out how to not say democracy so much, because I think that at the end of the day, we gotta start telling that story in a much different way. So as I close tonight, I wanted to do a couple of things. I wanted um, to talk about, I had read something from Simon Rosenberg in terms of the kind of the things that we can do. And I don't know how many of you all were able to join our show on Friday, but it was the chaos theory, which was really awesome. If you haven't watched that show, I'm going to encourage you to go back and watch it. The reason that I am is because chaos that we see from this administration is planned. Just like sending that text message, that video message about the Obamas, it's not an accident, people. That is purposeful. Every single thing that they do has purpose. The purpose of that one was to have all of us talking about it like I'm talking about it now, but I hope we're talking about it in a way that lets us understand that it is a strategy. And our strategy is to talk back and to make sure that people get an understanding about what they are doing and what they are signaling. That's what our job is. But our job is also to recognize where there are opportunities when they overstep, how we can step in and make sure that we are getting good information out and putting some sand in the wheels. And so if you watch Friday's show, you'll actually get to see how some of that happens. And I would encourage you to do that. The other point of Friday's show that was so good is the fact that sometimes you feel like nothing is happening, but there are so many things happening. When we come together tonight, there's something happening. When we have the court systems and Democracy Forward and all these other guys filing court cases, that is something happening. When we are messaging and sending postcards and talking to people, that is something happening. All of the things that we are doing is fighting against the chaos. We just want to continue to fight smarter and recognize what's happening. So I wanted to say that. And I also want to say to us, as we're talking to Republican friends and family, especially Republicans who are on the fence and people who are not Republicans, maybe they're just, they're just not talking or saying anything. They haven't figured out their lane yet. We always say silence is complicity. Well, today when I was researching and reading, I found another one that I think is as powerful. I think it's more. I don't know if you guys are still here or not. Something happened to my screen. Okay, perfect. I found one that was even more powerful. Silence in the face of evil is evil itself. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. And so I think that that's going to be the one that I use from now on, because I think silence is complicity. Yeah. But silence in the face of evil is evil itself. And I think that people have to know that this is not the time to be quiet. So, what can you do? You can make sure that you make calls to your House and to your senators so that they can hear your voice. You can continue to talk to your friends and your family. And you can continue just to stay in community because, as we said on Friday, community is the best fight against chaos. Thank you guys. It's 31 minutes and 15 seconds. I appreciate you guys for hanging with me tonight. And I will see you next week. And I will see you on Friday. Thank you all. I so appreciate you for hanging with me tonight. Yay! Thank you, Robin. Good night, everybody.